Can I real test real quick? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
We can hear you, Jim.
January 26, 2021 special meeting of the Monroe County Legislature will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Alcoffer.
Here.
Mr. Alcoffer is present. Mr. Ansello.
Here.
Mr. Ansello is present. Ms. Barnhart.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart is present. Mr. Baroff.
Here.
Mr. Baroff is present. Mr. Baines.
Here.
Mr. Baines is present. Ms. Boyce. Ms. Boyce. Mr. Brew.
Here.
Mr. Brew is present. President Carbone. Here. President Carbone is present. Mr. Colby.
Did you hear me?
Mr. Colby. Oh, now I hear you. Mr. Colby is present. Mr. Delahanty.
Here.
Mr. Delahanty is present. Mrs. DeFlorio.
Here.
Mrs. DeFlorio is present. Mr. Dondorfer.
Here.
Mr. Dondorfer is present. Mr. Felder. Mr. Flagler
Here.
Mitchell. Oh, sorry. Mr. Felder is present. Mr. Flagler Mitchell. Ms. Hassman.
Here.
Ms. Hassman is present. Mr. Hebert.
Here.
Mr. Hebert is present. Mr. Chiofetlassi.
Here.
Mr. Chiofetlassi is present. Ms. Lamar.
Here.
Ms. Lamar is present. Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Lee is present. Mr. Mafucci.
Here.
Mr. Mafucci is present. Mr. Marinetti.
Here.
Mr. Marinetti is present. Mr. Morelli.
Here.
Mr. Morelli is present. Ms. Roman.
Here.
Ms. Roman is present. Ms. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Smith is present. Ms. Taylor.
Here.
Ms. Taylor is present. Mr. Turp.
Here.
Mr. Turp is present. Mr. Wilcox.
Here.
Mr. Wilcox is present. Mr. Wilt.
Here.
Mr. Wilt is present. Mr. Udelson.
Here.
Mr. Udelson is present. Ms. Boyce.
Here.
Ms. Boyce is present. Mr. Flagler Mitchell. Mr. Flagler Mitchell is absent.
We will need to suspend the rules of the legislature for the purpose of prohibiting public in-person attendance in accordance with Executive Order 202.1, which is expended through January 29th. By Executive Order 202.87. If you have a motion before you which is moved by Legislator Brew and seconded by Legislator DeFlorio, this is a non-debatable motion. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Please join me in a moment of silent prayer. stand. Legislator Frank Alcoffer will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Legislator Alcoffer.
I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
To the
to
flag
to the
flag
flag of the United States of America
and
to the
to the republic
for
for
which
which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you, Legislator Alcoffer. I call this special meeting of the legislature pursuant to the authority vested in me as President of the Monroe County Legislature by Section C2-9C1 of the County Charter, Section 545-5 of the Rules of the Legislature of the County of Monroe. This meeting has been closed to the public, and all legislators are participating via teleconference in accordance with Executive Order 202.1 and 202.87. In keeping with this legislature's tradition of openness, the meeting is being live-streamed on YouTube through the legislature's official channel. Everyone participating via video or teleconference will please mute their devices except to obtain the floor or cast a vote. If seeking to obtain the floor, please simply state your name and wait for me to call on you before proceeding with your questions or statements. The clerk will read the full title of each resolution and referral to avoid any confusion as to which item is before the legislature. All votes will be held via voice vote unless a roll call is requested. Tonight we will consider a motion to convene a committee of the whole. In convening the committee of the whole, we will also discharge those items currently referred to the committee and commit them to the committee of the whole. All legislators will be members of the committee of the whole and able to participate in debate and vote on items regardless of their respective committee assignments or which committees the referral was initially assigned. The committee of the whole will be governed by the same rules of the legislature that can govern committee meetings, and votes taken are equivalent to those taken in committee, meaning items passed by the committee of the whole will be considered for final approval or appropriate action at the next regularly scheduled meeting of the legislature. Following the conclusion of the committee of the whole, we will consider two items for final adoption by the full legislature, agenda items 25 and 26. We will now hold the public forum. Mr. Clerk.
We don't have speakers signed up for the public forum for the special meeting, but we do, however, for committee of the whole, and those comments will be read at that time.
Thank you. We will now proceed with the consideration of motions, resolutions, and notices. Will the clerk read the next item on the agenda?
Item number 1, motion to discharge, convene, and commit, providing that file numbers 21-0005, 21-0006, 21-0009, through 21-0028, 21-0030, and 21-0031 be discharged from the Public Safety, Planning, Economic Development, Transportation, Intergovernmental Relations, Human Services, Environment and Public Works, and Ways and Means Committees, providing that the legislature convene a committee of the whole, providing that files number 21-0005, 21-0006, 21-0009, through 21-0028, 21-0030, and 21-0031 be committed to the committee of the whole.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Bruce, seconded by Legislator DeFlorio. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. At this time, we'll recess the January 26, 2021 special meeting of the Monroe County Legislature, and we will convene the committee of the whole. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Alcoffer.
here.
Mr. Alcoffer is present. Mr. Ansello.
Here.
Mr. Ansello is present. Ms. Barnhart.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart is present. Mr. Baroth.
Here.
Mr. Baroth is present. Mr. Baines.
Here.
Mr. Baines is present. Ms. Boyce.
Here.
Ms. Boyce is present. Mr. Brew.
Here.
Mr. Brew is present. President Carbone.
Here.
President Carbone is present. Mr. Colby.
Here.
Mr. Colby is present. Mr. Delahanty.
Here.
Mr. Delahanty is present. Mrs. DeFlorio.
Here.
Mrs. DeFlorio is present. Mr. Dondorfer.
Here.
Mr. Dondorfer is present. Mr. Felder.
Here.
Mr. Felder is present. Mr. Flagler Mitchell. Mr. Flagler Mitchell is absent. Ms. Hassman.
Here.
Ms. Hassman is present. Mr. Hebert.
Here.
Mr. Hebert is present. Mr. Teofilasi.
Here.
Mr. Teofilasi is present. Ms. Lamar.
Here.
Lamar is present. Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Mr. Lee is present. Mr. Mafucci.
Here.
Mr. Mafucci is present. Mr. Marionetti.
Here.
Mr. Marionetti is present. Mr. Morelli.
Here.
Mr. Morelli is present. Ms. Roman.
Here.
Ms. Roman is present. Ms. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Smith is present. Ms. Taylor.
Here.
Taylor is present. Mr. Turp.
Here.
Mr. Turp is present. Mr. Wilcox.
Here.
Mr. Wilcox is present. Mr. Wilt.
Here.
Mr. Wilt is present. Mr. Udelson.
Here.
Mr. Udelson is present.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. You have the minutes from the December 15, 2020 meeting of the Committee of the Whole before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. We will now hold the public forum. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. We do have email comments that will be read as part of the public forum. Our first email comes from Kathleen Ione. I'm writing to urge County Ledge President Joe Carbone to call for an independent counsel to investigate the circumstances regarding legislator Flagler Mitchell sending an explicit photo to a 19-year-old. Lakia Sinclair has shown courage in coming forward with her experience, and she should be taken seriously. Her concerns should be investigated. Thank you. Next email comes from Carmen Coleman. I'm writing on behalf of Lakia, a young girl who has accused Monroe County Ernest Flagler of sexual impropriety while serving in an official capacity. If the allegation against Mr. Flagler is proven to be accurate, then I hope that the committee is prepared to take action in order to restore the public's trust, whatever the appropriate action is for members under the circumstance. The public needs to be able to trust the leadership of government, especially in crisis, without fear of being taken advantage of. Our next email comes from Nancy Berlove. I'm writing in support of the proposed language access plan under consideration by the legislature. I have been a sign language interpreter for over 40 years. While things are better than they were 40 years ago, we still have a long way to go. Agencies and governments still throw up roadblocks to language access for both LEP individuals as well as those who need ASL to communicate. Too often there is an inquiry for services and the cheapest price is awarded the job or contract and not the most qualified. Unqualified interpreters are a waste of money and time, or they request services as an afterthought, or they don't even consider the needs of those individuals. We need someone in a position to monitor the long-term effect of these horrendous practices, to advocate for training on how to make language access work effectively, and to be a resource to the community in general. Please vote in favor of this legislation and support language justice for people who can't or don't use spoken English as their first language. Our next email comes from Marlene Cortez. Bear with me a moment, it's an attachment. We write to express our support for the referral sponsored by legislators Roman and Hassman to amend the 2021 operating budget to fund a language access position in the county's newly created Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. The lack of information concerning COVID-19 for people in the limited English proficient and deaf or hard of hearing communities in the greater Rochester area is worrisome. We are especially worried about the gaps in information and guidance regarding COVID-19 available to these communities. This lack of information has increased the possibility of misinformation and confusion and may ultimately result in the exposure of people in those communities to unnecessary health risks. Monroe County is home to over 30,000 residents and limited English proficient community and is one of the highest per capita deaf or hard of hearing communities. This referral would increase the county's capacity to provide translation and interpretation services, especially with respect to COVID-19 for the LEP and deaf or hard of hearing communities, and ensure they receive critical information in a format they can understand. There's a crucial need for this kind of support in Monroe County, especially during the pandemic, where limited English proficient communities have missed out on critical information because it was not provided in their native language, and interpretation services have not been readily available at agencies providing services. We urge you to provide these much-needed translation and interpretation services as quickly as possible. Our next email is from Angelica Perez Delgado. As you are aware, roughly 30% of Latinos in Monroe County do not speak English well and prefer their information in Spanish. Ibero-American Action League continues to be deeply concerned about the lack of information concerning COVID-19 for people in the limited English proficient community in the greater Rochester area. As the only dual dual language human services organization serving over 16,000 Latinos annually in Monroe County. Our Bureau supports the legislative action to amend the 2021 operating budget to transfer funds from the Legislature Community Contingency Fund to the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the purpose of funding one full-time position dedicated to language access services. Despite multiple efforts and advocacy throughout the history of Latinos in Monroe County, the county's record of support for the needs of the LEP community has been minimal. This bill will afford the county the opportunity to make significant strides towards equity and inclusion of the LEP community. It is only through the allocation of funding, human resources, and political will that this large segment of Monroe County residents will rise to the level of priority required. Our Bureau stands ready to support the county in implementation of such role and willing to share institutional knowledge in serving the vulnerable and hard-to-reach population. We urge you to support this legislative action sponsored by Legislator Roman and Hassman. Please do not hesitate to email me directly if you have any questions or concerns. Our next email is from Benjamin Kiernan. It is imperative that independent counsel review the allegations brought forward regarding Legislator Flagler Mitchell. These accusations need to be taken seriously and they need to be reviewed by independent counsel to ensure that politics does not play a role in the ultimate decision. Public trust in our leaders and government depends on this, as does finding justice in this matter. Our next email is from Mary Lupian. I'm writing to condemn the sexual harassment of Lakai Sinclair by Legislator Ernest Flagler Mitchell. I've known Legislator Flagler Mitchell for a few years, and we've had meetings and discussions in the past. Though I personally never felt harassed by him, I have known other women that have been. I have screenshots of their messages. I've heard reports of others that had similar pictures sent to them. I know what it's like to feel paralyzed with indecision on how to handle a situation. Unwanted comments, suggestions, questions that still take my breath away and make me feel like no matter what my position in life, be it mother, daughter, teacher, or city council member, that my existence can be reduced to what my body is worth to some random guy on the street, or worse, to a professional acquaintance with whom I built trust. I've agonized for weeks and had friends give me feedback on how I should respond, only to never have the courage to stand up for myself. I know how hard it is for Lakai Sinclair to speak out and hold a powerful man accountable for his actions. Ernest abused the trust of a young girl, a survivor of one of our city's greatest tragedies. He abused his power and position and betrayed the trust put in by the public. I stand with her, I believe her, and I demand that the legislator be removed from his position of power as a consequence for his actions and as a warning to others that this behavior will not be tolerated. This is not about politics, this is about accountability. Bring what's done in the shadows into the light is the only way things will change. Our next email is from Amanda Gano-Hauser. My name is Amanda Gano-Hauser, and I'm a resident of Parma. I urge the legislature to call for an outside counsel investigation of the allegations brought against Legislator Ernest Flagler Mitchell by Lakai Sinclair. We are living in a time of increased political polarization, which has led to increasing distrust in our government and institutions. The solution to this is transparency and accountability. The allegations against Legislator Flagler Mitchell are serious, and the appearance that he abused his position as a legislator in order to harass a young woman in his district must be addressed in the most transparent way possible. Lakai Sinclair displayed great courage coming forward. She deserves our support and deserves a full and transparent investigation into this matter. Most of all, she deserves the support of the legislature in holding its members accountable to high ethical standards. As it stands, the information that's come to light so far reflects poorly on Legislator Flagler Mitchell. Without an independent investigation, it will reflect poorly on the legislature as a whole. In particular, it will be a reflection on the majority leader and caucus, as you are the ones who have the numbers and power to ensure an independent investigation is carried out. Your decision on whether or not to do so sends a message to all your constituents, but particularly to those who've been victims of harassment or assault. Our next email is from Patrice LeBron. I am writing in support of Lakai Sinclair. I believe her and believe that this is not a one-time accidental occurrence that this legislator refers to, as there are Facebook messages before the explicit message that has a sexual undertone to the wording. I support Lakai in her request that Mr. Flagler Mitchell is removed immediately as legislator for District 29. As a woman of color who has endured sexual harassment from this particular legislator, it is not easy to bring forth. Women are often, but particularly Black and brown women, held to a higher degree of scrutiny and disbelief when they come forward. I commend Lakai for her bravery, despite knowing that she would have to endure lies, false statements, and individuals either doubting her story or ignoring it altogether. Some of you have remained silent while raising daughters, having nieces, sisters, and mothers. When situations in which sexual assault, rape, widespread violence, or sexual harassment are ignored, trivialized, normalized, or made into jokes, this is rape culture. When anyone is defending an accuser, ignoring or denouncing a victim because of the accuser's status, this is rape culture. As many of you remain silent, you are upholding rape culture beliefs and norms. The fact that women, again in particular Black and brown women, have to condition ourselves in our everyday conversations to endure sexual harassment is wrong. I also applaud Lakai Sinclair for knowing what happened to her is wrong. I hope that after hearing from this community, you have a clear understanding of what is meant by the phrase rape culture. I hope you understand how some of your actions uphold this culture while allowing young ladies to be exposed to further trauma. Moreover, I hope that you are more likely to believe in this culture's existence and want to fight for eradication so that no more women are subjected to this in the future, especially at the hands of a public figure. I hope you can find ways to address this situation immediately and start by supporting Lakai Sinclair. Our next email is from Rui Maker. I'm a senior attorney and I co-convene the Greater Rochester Community Reinvestment Coalition. I have worked on language access in Monroe County for 3 decades. I have worked with local banks as well as federal agencies such as New York Federal Reserve Bank and Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. In my work with limited English proficient New Yorkers, I have been advocating for services, languages most commonly spoken in New York. Many New Yorkers are limited English proficient. That can include residents who have been here for decades as well as new immigrants. A very common problem is that parents use young children to translate. In sensitive situations, parents withhold information they don't want their child to know, thus creating unsafe situations for their own well-being as well as the community. Children with limited vocabulary may translate incorrectly. LEP consumers are routinely taken advantage of and suffer financial loss because they don't speak or read English. Even New Yorkers who appear proficient can be hurt in transactions as they may not know the concept in a doctor's office financial transaction. Given the critical information that Monroe County disseminates, it is in all our interest to serve our LEP neighbors by sharing information in the most common spoken languages in Monroe County. Pending New York State legislation will also make this requisite at New York State agencies. Thank you. That concludes our public forum.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with new business. Will the clerk read the next item on the agenda, please?
Item number 1, referral 21-0005, amending the 2021 Monroe County budget to authorize an increase to the Veteran Service Agency budget to add an additional county service worker position and implement a pilot ecotherapy program for veterans.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Hebert, seconded by Legislators Alcoffer, Wilt, and Mafucci. Is there any discussion, please? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Next item.
Item number 2, referral 21-0006, amend the 2021 operating budget to transfer appropriations from the Legislature's Community Contingency Fund to the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to fund a language access position.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by Legislator Delahanty, seconded by Legislator Hebert. Is there any discussion on this, please?
Mr. President, this is Legislator Brew.
Legislator Brew, go ahead, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to Legislator Roman for introducing this legislation that seeks to utilize resources from the Legislature's Community Contingency Fund. I'm glad that you and your colleagues are embracing this fund, and as I might add, you were initially opposed to. I believe that there are merits to this legislation. However, I do have several questions. Through the President, can you provide us with the status of the hiring of a Chief Diversity Officer?
Mr. President, I believe Corinda Crosdale, the Deputy County Executive, is available to answer that. Through you, Mr. President, this is Jeff McCann. I'm sorry, I don't believe she's on the line.
I'm sorry, Jeff, I'm sorry. I didn't hit *6 to unmute.
Oh, okay.
I'll start all over. I talked for a few minutes before I realized I was on mute. So through the president, we did, as we indicated during the last legislative meeting, that we would complete the interview process by the 20th. We did complete that process. We narrowed it down to a select few candidates that we'll be putting in front of the county executive to make final determinations or final decisions.
Thank you, Deputy County Executive Crosdale. If a follow-up question, if I may, through the president to the administration, do we know the remaining timeline in making the decisions for the official appointment of the Chief Diversity Officer?
Through the president, it should be in the next couple of days.
Thank you, Deputy County Executive. And just a follow-up question to that for clarification through the president to the administration. So you're indicating that that decision should be made within the next couple of days. Would you say by the end of this week?
Through the president, that should be doable. I just have to coordinate calendars.
Thank you. Another question through the president to the administration. Can you please provide a job description for this position?
Through the president, that shouldn't be a problem.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mr. President, this is Jeff McCann. Was Legislator Brew talking about the Chief Diversity Officer or the matter referenced in the referral?
I was actually talking about the Chief Diversity Officer to the President, to the administration.
Okay.
Legislator Brew, do you have any further?
No, I'm not sure. I apologize, Mr. President. I'm not sure if I received the response.
Through you, Mr. President, I believe we've given that information a couple times. I believe that's now part of the charter, but yes, we can send that again.
The
So
President.
that's the job description for the Chief Diversity Officer. Is that what you wanted, Legislator Brew?
That is correct.
Point of order, Mr. President. That has nothing to do with the matter before us. Mr. Brew's already received that information. Perhaps he should just go back and look at it. But all of that's been discussed here, so I'm not sure the line of questioning.
Through the President.
Point of order. Go ahead, Legislator Brew. Do you have any further discussion?
No, I don't, but I would look forward to the response to that question. To the President, another question to the administration. When the 2021 budget was presented, there was no information provided for this department, including goals and objectives, performance measures, etc. Has any of this been updated?
Point of order, Mr. President. The Chief Diversity Officer Department's already been discussed. This is not what we're talking about right now. Perhaps the majority leader should focus on what is germane to the conversation.
Actually, where you're coming from, Legislator Morelli, but I think that the Chief Diversity Officer is germane to the position we're discussing, so I'm going to allow the question.
All right.
You can overrule the order of the chair.
God, why?
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a second to that?
I second that. Legislator Roman.
Thank you, Legislator Roman.
A yes upholds the ruling of the chair. Mr. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Brew votes yes. Mr. Felder?
Yes.
Mr. Felder votes yes. Mr. Feigl-Mitchell? Mr. Feigl-Mitchell is absent. Mr. Alcoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Alcoffer votes yes. Mr. Ansello?
Yes.
Mr. Ansello votes yes. Ms. Barnhart?
No.
Ms. Barnhart votes no. Mr. Baroff?
No.
Mr. Baroff votes no. Mr. Baines?
No.
Mr. Baines votes no. Ms. Boyce?
Yes.
Ms. Boyce votes yes. Mr. Colby?
Yes.
Mr. Colby votes yes. Mr. Delahanty?
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Delahany votes yes. Mrs. DeFlorio?
Yes.
Mr. DeFlorio votes yes. Mr. Dondorfer?
Yes.
Mr. Dondorfer votes yes. Ms. Hassman?
No. No.
Ms. Hassman votes no. Mr. Hebert?
Yes.
Mr. Hebert votes yes. Mr. Keofat-Lassie?
Yes.
Mr. Keofat-Lassie votes yes. Ms. Lamar?
Yes.
Ms. Lamar votes yes. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Lee votes yes. Mr. Mafucci?
No.
Mafucci votes no. Mr. Marionetti?
Yes.
Mr. Marionetti votes yes. Mr. Morelli?
No.
Mr. Morelli votes no. Ms. Roman?
No.
Ms. Roman votes no. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
Taylor votes yes. Mr. Terp? Mr. Terp?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Terp votes yes. Mr. Wilcox?
No.
Mr. Wilcox votes no. Mr. Wilt?
Yes.
Mr. Wilt votes yes. Mr. Udelson?
No.
Mr. Udelson votes no. President Carbone?
Yes.
President Carbone votes yes. 19-9. The president's ruling is upheld.
Legislator Brew, you still have the floor?
Thank you, Mr. President, and through the president to the administration, does this account for funding through the entire year? And this is relating to the interpretation services.
Through you, Mr. President, now we're talking about the position that's in the referral, correct?
That is
Yes,
correct.
yes, we are.
Yes, it does.
Okay. And a follow-up question to that, through the president to the administration, does the $90,000 include salary and benefits?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, it does.
Okay. And through the president to the administration, what salary group will the position be?
Through you, Mr. President, the job title would be determined by a review through the Civil Service Commission and the standard process that would be in place for that. This budget amount would cover a position that would be as high as a Group 15. But it doesn't automatically mean that's what it would be. That's for budgeting purposes, and for this referral, it could be lower depending on Civil Services determination.
Yes, thank you. And through the president to the administration, how long after the legislative approval will it take to fill the position?
Through you, Mr. President, I know the Civil Service Commission meets monthly. I'm not sure how the calendar falls and how that's related to the referral. There would be a job posting that would take several weeks up to a month. There would be interviews conducted, and depending on the selection of a candidate, could be an additional 2 to 4 weeks. So I would anticipate that could be anywhere from 2 to 3 months would be a rough guess.
Okay, thank you. And through the president, will this be a civil service test position? If so, is there already an established list?
Through you, Mr. President, Civil Service would determine what the classification would be and whether or not it would be civil service.
Okay. Another question through the president to the administration. Would there be a value in working with the Chief Diversity Officer and or the Diversity Action Plan Advisory Committee to create this position and tailor it to the goals and objectives of that department?
Through you, Mr. President, I would stress, this is a referral that's being made by the legislature, but by all means, we would welcome a coordination between this position and the Chief Diversity Officer and the Diversity Action Plan Committee.
Yes, thank you. And, that was sort of the basis of my questions around the diversity officer. I know there's some objections by Legislator Morelli, but I do think that these are indeed connected to each other, and that the chief diversity officer should have some input as to the hiring and the job description and direction of this individual. So some additional questions, if I may, to the president. Are there presently or have there been community programs or organizations support these efforts by providing translators?
This is not a translation service. And I think that is the entire reason why we as a county need to do this.
Through the president, legislator.
Okay, through the president, I guess my question back to Legislator Roman would be then, so you are saying that there are no existing provisions for translators presently in the county, is that correct?
Through the president. So the very question itself is the reason why we as legislators and the county need to ensure that we're looking at language access as a plan. Though I respect the title of the Chief Diversity Officer, language access should be something that the county intentionally thinks about moving forward. We can't continue to waste time and resources without thinking about an actual plan. And just the vocabulary that is being used to ask these questions, it is clear that the governing body doesn't understand the extent of language access and how it functions. And that's why a position like this is vitally important to ensuring that our individuals in our community who are part of the LEP community have the critical information that they need. So it's far more than just about providing translators. This position will provide a holistic approach to ensuring that the county is providing language access and access points to individuals in our community that need to know what's going on.
Yeah, and through the president, to Legislator Roman, I'd like to personally thank her, and on behalf of the my caucus, as far as clarifying this. And I do apologize if there were any words that were used that were inaccurate in describing the functions. So language access is the operative words that we're going to be using from this point forward. And thank you for your clarification.
No problem.
Another question to the administration, through the president, if I may. Has the County Department of Human Services ever provided language access services in the past?
Through the chair, this is Deputy County Executive Crosdale. It's required that we provide language access. So if a constituent presents themselves as needing a translator, interpreter of any kind, we are required to provide that. We do have several contracts in place to accommodate should the immediate need arise.
Thank you, Deputy County Executive Crossdale. And a follow-up question to that would be then, if DHS is presently providing some of those services to language access, would this be a duplication of services in any way? And of course, I'm directing that question from the president to either the administration or Legislator Roman.
I can answer that question, or through my understanding, the county is more than just DHS, DMV, BOE, the zoo, if you will. There should be a holistic approach at how the county ensures language access is provided. So there are some county departments that are doing a really good job because of the people that they come in contact with every day. But the reality is that this person would provide services across the board to the county so that we're not scrambling and ensuring that we're doing what we're doing.
Thank you, Legislator Roman. Please direct your comments through the president.
Oh, my apologies.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and through the president back to Legislator Roman. So am I to understand that you're offering assurances that there is no duplication of services between this proposed new position and what is presently provided through DHS? Could I just have a definitive yes or no on that, please, to the president?
Through the president, the intent is to ensure that this individual oversees and ensures that all department heads are working together. So there shouldn't be duplication of services. What should be happening, occurring, is that across the board, language access is being discussed. There are positions like this in other governments.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, just to provide a point of clarification to the president, we do not have a position in Department of Human Services that does overall planning for language access, if that helps at all.
Through the president's administration, yes, thank you for that clarification. Through the president's administration, another question, if I may. This referral states the focus of the position would be related to COVID-19 and other emergencies. If so, why is this position not being added to the Department of Communications, Public Health, or Public Safety?
Through the president, the intent was to ensure that, again, a holistic approach was taken when this piece of legislation was drafted after countless conversations with advocates in the community in regards to the best practices for language access. It was determined that it should be a holistic approach and not a departmental approach to ensure that this service is rendered.
Okay, and through the president to the administration, so with the new position being created, who would this individual be reporting to?
Through you, Mr. President, it would be the Chief Diversity Officer, I believe, if that's the department that it's housed in.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCann. I guess, again, I have to refer back to the previous comments that the basis of my remarks regarding the Department of Diversity, seeing that this individual will be reporting to that department head, it is only logical and prudent to be asking about that department head and the ability to manage his own direct reports, one of which is going to be this language access professional. Another question, if I may, to the president, does the administration support adding this position? And if so, why did the administration not contemplate the addition of this position in the 2021 budget?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, we do support the referral.
Thank you.
The question, Legislator Rue?
Yeah, Mr. President, I'd just like to summarize, if I may. I do appreciate the questions and responses from both the administration and Legislator Roman. I do feel that they were adequately answered, and I would ask that those questions that there were not definitive answers provided, and I can provide a follow-up to the administration, that those answers be provided prior to our general legislative meeting this coming February. So I will be voting to support the creation of this position and urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Who's that?
Mr. President, Legislator Boyce.
Yes, Legislator Boyce, you have the floor.
Yes, I just have a question to the maker of the motion through the president. Would this, when you decided to do this, did you also envision that this would also help the community as a whole for other not-for-profits to be able to utilize and work collaboratively with the county?
Through you, Mr. President, that's a great question, Carla. In general, part of this legislation has come through feedback from nonprofits who have currently held the burden of ensuring that critical information is being shared with the individuals that they work alongside. So in general, by the county ensuring that its information is being disseminated will absolutely help nonprofits in a ripple effect, if you will.
Thank you. Through the president,
Legislator Lamar.
one follow-up question.
Excuse me, Legislator Lamar. Legislator Boyce still has the floor. I'll call on you next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, through the president to the maker of the motion. Also, just wanted to ask, I'm aware that you work at United Way. Has United Way made any comments with regards to this and any services that they're or collaboration they can do with the county on this?
So that's not the role in which I serve. Through you, Mr. President, that's not the role in which I serve during my day job, but I'm sure that there have been some conversations as a lot of different organizations continue to focus on language access.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you any further questions, Legislator Boyce?
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay, Legislator Lamar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And through you, I just would like to explain my vote. I do think that this is a great step towards including diverse communities. I appreciate the Latino community coming out and supporting this, but I want us to remember that Monroe County has a large refugee. We're talking about language access, that we are also including them as well. But also, I would be remiss if I didn't point out some of the hypocrisy. It amazes me that the same people who voted against the contingency fund are the first people to put their hands in the cookie jar. I'm glad that you've thought this through and see how marginalized communities can benefit from this, but I digress because the need is greater than my need to point out your hypocrisy. I want to thank both Legislator Roman and Legislator Hasman for finally putting forth legislation that's positive and that the community can benefit from. So I'll be voting in the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you
Legislator
very much.
DeFlorio.
Legislator DeFlorio, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Through the president to the administration, I just wanted one point of clarity, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you said that the $90,000 that is in this referral represented a full year's salary. Is that correct through the president to the administration?
Through you, Mr. President, yes.
And through the president to the administration, again, for a point of clarity, I believe you said it would be at least another 2 to 3 months before this position would be able to be filled. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. President, yes.
Thank you. So I'm wondering then if it would be more appropriate to revise this figure to more like 3/4 of the year salary, which would be closer to 67,000 or 68,000 as opposed to the full 90,000 that is currently in the referral.
Through you, Mr. President, my answer to that is I'm not sure. That's something we can look at and get back to you before full legislature.
And if that's the case, through the president to the administration, is that something that could be adjusted before the full legislature meets?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, I will have a discussion with our HR and Finance Department, and we will take a look at that number again, and we will respond before the full legislature.
Thank you. And then one further question, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but do we have a job description for this position through the president to the administration or to the maker of this motion?
Through you, Mr. President. No, I believe that is all part of the Civil Service Commission's work. There is a form that gets filled out that explains what the duties are, and then that is reviewed by staff and Human Resources. It's presented to the Civil Service Commission, and then with that there's a recommendation, and I believe that recommendation would also include not only a salary level, but would also then help set up a job spec that would then be posted and advertised for potential candidates.
Okay, thank you. I think that was where, at least in my mind, some of the confusion was coming from with regard to what this position actually was, because we didn't really have anything to look at. So, thank you. And I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
I believe Legislator Felder called the floor. Was that you, Legislator?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, you have the floor.
I have a question. Well, no question. I have a few comments. Leaving aside the hypocrisy Legislator Lamar talked about in terms of trying to be the first people to take money out
For the president, Legislator Felder.
I have a question as to if we don't have a chief diversity officer, we don't have any goals and objectives for the department. How are we hiring how are we creating a position in the department that does not exist yet? It's there on paper, but it's not there in reality. The second thing is, the cynical side of me says, well, I believe that this is something the administration should have already been doing, and that money should have been allocated out of the budget. I think it's ridiculous to be coming to the contingency fund to get money to fund a position, to fund a permanent position to fund a permanent position. That money should be coming out of some of that money that we know exists and unallocated in salary lines that have been allocated that have not been filled. We don't need to take it from the contingency fund. We can take it from other departments where they're just sitting on money they're never going to spend. And so, I've spoken to the Bureau about this. So I support the legislation, but I think that the community contingency fund is the wrong place to take this from, because this is going to be a permanent position. It needs to be funded out of the permanent budget line. I'm sure it's not something we're just going to do for 2021. So, I think that's something that needs to be looked at. Yes, we fund the position, but it should not be coming out of the contingency fund, because this is going to be a permanent budgeted position. It needs to come out of a permanent budget line that they're sitting on, that they're not ever going to hire anybody into. And I think that's what we need to be looking at as we get ready to actually pass this legislation.
Any further
Mr. President?
Legislator Felder?
I'm done.
Okay, Legislator
Mr. President Colby?
Go ahead, Legislator.
Can you hear me?
Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
President. I'd like to follow up through
Hello?
you, Mr.
No, Legislator Colby has the floor now. Go ahead, Legislator Colby.
Okay. Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, I'd like to follow up on part of Steve's question that the administration didn't completely answer. Steve asked, Legislator Brew asked the administration, were they in favor of this position? They said yes. But the second part of that question was, why wasn't it considered as part of their budget that they presented to us 2 months ago? That's my question to the administration through you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Legislator.
Yeah, through you, Mr. President. You know, we put together a budget. There are limitations to what we do when we put that budget together to make it balance. You know, much like the other position that is coming out of the contingency fund through the Veteran Services Department. You know, we support these positions. The contingency fund was created by the legislature to fund projects such as this, and we support them. I mean, there are a number of positions. If we had unlimited funds and unlimited finances, I'm sure I can assure you that our budget would look much different than it does. But the reality is we don't, and we try to take that balance. And you know, the legislature created this fund. Legislators decided that these items are priorities, and we're supporting those priorities that are on the agenda tonight. Legislator Colby.
May I respond to that?
Legislator Felder.
I still have the floor.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. I guess I'd like to explain my vote. I think I'll vote for this tonight to let it go through the full ledge meeting, but I have some big concerns that we are putting the cart in front of the horse. And where I come from, you don't start funding positions until you have an administrator that's going to suit the supervisor in place, or at least a job description for that, before you hire somebody like this. I really have grave concerns of hiring somebody before you have the head of the department in place. But I'm not I'll vote for it tonight with reserves to change my vote when it comes to the full ledge, because at this time, unless somebody makes a compelling case, I probably would be voting in the negative at the full ledge. Thank you for the floor. I yield the floor back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Legislator Colby. Legislator Felder, did you want the floor again?
Yes. I just wanted to respond to something that was said by the Deputy County Executive. The county executive vetoed the legislation, vetoed the part of the budget that created this. So it seems to me, and this is cynic in me, that this is just a way for the administration to claw back some of the funding that was allocated here. It doesn't make any sense does not make any sense for us to be funding a permanent position out of a contingency fund. We know for a fact that there are 200 to 300 funded positions in the budget that are not filled, most of which will never be filled. But yet they're coming to the contingency fund that we created, and this is the way it has to be. I'll support it because I support this effort. But it seems to me that the money should be coming from somewhere else than the contingency fund, because this is something they should already be doing. And I, like Legislator Colby, I've already spoken about the fact that we don't have a department, and we create a position. But I think it's necessary. I think it's important. There are a lot. I know Legislator Kia Falazi represents a lot of refugees in his district from Africa and Southeast Asia and other parts, and so it's important to do this. But by the same token, we need to make sure we're doing it right. We're not just allowing people to come and just rob the cookie jar when they didn't even want to create the fund in the first place. And that's something we really need to look at, because I don't believe this should be coming from the contingency fund, from the community contingency fund, because this is something that should be part of that department. And it should have been created, and it should have been created that way. Because you don't have any goals or any objectives for the department, so we don't have any goals and objectives for the department, but we created a position for the department with no goals and objectives. So that's a serious question for me. And so those two questions, raise some serious issues in my mind, even though my inclination is to support this because I know it's necessary. So I'll vote for it tonight.
Thank you, Legislator Felder. Any further discussion?
Legislator Udelson.
Legislator Udelson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, I just want to compliment Minority Leader Roman and Legislator Asman for bringing this important referral forward. I also want to recognize the detailed questions of the Majority Leader, Legislator Colby, and others about job descriptions, etc. The legislature should certainly have full information and understanding the positions we're asked to vote on. So I'm impressed by the change from just a few months ago when 6 positions were created in the Board of Elections without job descriptions or even the documentation of the need for new positions. But I anticipate this will have strong support, and I thank my colleagues for that, and I'm glad to vote in favor of it. I also, through you, Mr. President, just want to mention quickly about the use of the contingency fund. I guess I see it differently. The funds were drawn from the budget as originally presented, so it makes sense to me that this would be the source for them. It was presented as a source for services for our constituents, and this certainly meets that description. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Legislator. I believe Legislator Hebert, did you want the floor?
Yes, sir. I apologize for my misunderstanding early on, and largely probably based on public forum comments. I was thinking this was Spanish only. This is through you, Mr. President, to whomever wants to answer, Legislator Roman or the administration. Is it your intent that this position handle multiple languages across all of the different county departments?
Through you, Mr. President, in the legislation, it kind of states, there's 30,000 individuals plus the hard of hearing community that represents language, English proficient individuals. So this is not just solely to address Spanish speaking communities, it's to address all communities, and it's to address communities who need information in a different method than just in English. So ASL, Spanish, various languages outside of just the Spanish language. But it has been noted that both Spanish and ASL are 2 of the most top spoken languages in this community.
Thank you, Legislator. Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, or actually, let's go back to Legislator Roman. Is it conceivable that this employee then might not even be multilingual, including American Sign Language? Could they just be an English speaker or just a Spanish speaker, or, like I said, not multilingual?
Through you, Mr. President. So the task of this individual is to ensure that the services are being provided. So the individual can, come with a wide range of skill sets, whether it be them being bilingual or monolingual, but their job would be to ensure that individuals have access points. So what that means is that individuals can read or can see information in ways that they understand.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. President, to the administration, probably Mr. McCann, you said that the $90,000 amount funded a grade 15 position, I believe. And I'm very familiar with civil service. They're quite free. Given the broad range of skills that Legislator Roman just described, is it conceivable that civil service could come back and say this is a higher grade position than a 15?
Through you, Mr. President, yes. Yeah, and again, I would just add, this was actually, through you, Mr. President, with Legislator Hebert's question, I guess I might reconsider what I had said to Legislator DeFlorio, because we don't know what they're going to come back and say. So, maybe I will still try to get a better handle on that in terms of in terms of what the appropriate funding would be. But yes, I would say it is possible that it could come back at higher than a 15.
Thank you. And just as a final comment, I too, like Legislator Colby, will be supporting this tonight. But given we don't have a director in the department to set goals, given that we don't have a job description, given that we don't know civil service situation, I may change this vote in full legislature. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Legislator Hebert. Any further discussion?
Legislator Roman? Oh.
Legislator Roman, you've got the... Pardon?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. Legislator Roman, you have the floor.
Yes. In general, I just want to make comments in regards to there not being an individual who has been selected to be the Chief Diversity Officer. One of the things that I want to make sure that we all remember is that a few weeks ago, this same question came to the floor in regards to appointing individuals for the Diversity Action Plan Advisory Committee. At that point, the majority did not find an issue with appointing those individuals. I can tell you that this position is vitally important to creating the structure for a department like the one that we will be building, and it absolutely should not be an afterthought. If you talk to anyone in the community that is a part of the language advocacy community, they can tell you that too often what happens is diversity action plans are created and they do not include language access. So this should be something that we put in the forefront. I'm thrilled to hear that individuals are thinking of supporting and will support tonight, because it's vitally important that we start this conversation quickly and we start to put into motion ensuring that we are providing those access points. So, thank you.
Mr. President.
Yes,
I just
want
to correct something. The Diversity Action Plan and Chief Diversity Officer are two different things. Those were two separate entities. Diversity Action Plan and the people on that committee are there to monitor the county to make sure certain things are being met. But that's separate. That was created separately from the Department of Diversity. We need to make sure that we're clear about that. So select people for that sit on that committee. Without a Chief Diversity Officer, it doesn't really mean anything, because even without a Chief Diversity Officer, that committee still has a mission. And which, even without a Chief Diversity Officer, they're still there to monitor the county government and make sure that we are achieving diversity goals in all across the county. The Chief Diversity Officer, now we have one, or we'll have one soon. We'll be working with, once they get there, we'll be working with them. But even without a Chief Diversity Officer, that committee was going to be created. And it wasn't until after Legislator Flackler Commission came up with the idea of the Chief Diversity, he and Legislator Turk, that the county executive put forth his proposal for a Chief Diversity Officer. We need to be clear about that.
Thank you, Legislator Felder. Any further discussion?
Legislator Turp.
Legislator Turp, go ahead.
I'll do my best to try to get through this question. This is to the maker of the motion or the administration. I've learned over the past few months that there is a huge demand for language access in going through the Diversity Action Plan. And I think Legislator Roman might have answered this question, but the question is there a limit to the amount of languages that will be offered by this position or referral?
Through the President.
Through the President, meaning will this be offered to people speaking from all languages from any countries, seeing as how there is a large refugee community in the county?
Through you, President Carbone.
to the administration or the maker of the motion.
Yeah, through you, Mr. President, I believe the intent of the position is to study language access and develop a plan for language access for like the broadest spectrum of the community possible. So no, there wouldn't be a limit in how many languages or anything like that in terms of who would be served. I think it's a position that helps guarantee language access across the broadest spectrum possible.
Okay, thank you. And then through the administration to the maker, or through the president to the administration or the maker of the motion, seeing as how there are refugees spread out throughout the county in lots of different places, how do we plan on advertising this just to make sure that the people who really need it will know that it's available?
Through you, Mr. President, I would also defer to Legislator Roman if I miss anything, but I think that's what the whole intent of this position is to devise strategies and make sure that there are policies and procedures in place to make sure that the broadest spectrum of languages have access to county services, and that we're providing everything people need to provided for them in a way that they're able to comprehend it.
I guess to the maker of the motion. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Legislator Roman.
So through you, Mr. President, in general, just something that through my research that I've been able to gather is that, to answer your question, the Department of Motor Vehicles currently offers services in about 20 different languages. So we just have to ensure that that's happening wherever necessary in county services. So the individual charged with coordinating this service would be an advocate to serve all the communities at large. We just have to roll this out holistically.
Thank you for that answer. I'm going to vote yes for this. I think this is a very much needed service, but just want to make sure we have some type of a plan to make sure that the people who need this know about it, or there's almost no point in doing it. So I will be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Legislator Hebert.
Go ahead, Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration or the creator of the motion. Being a big supporter of stealing willfully good ideas, you mentioned that the clerk already has a program similar. Couldn't we just steal their program and implement that?
Through you, Mr. President, I think in general, this position would look at best practices and ensure that they are being rolled out throughout the entire county. So looking at the language plan that the Department of Motor Vehicles has, or Department of Human Services has, and ensuring that they're mainstreamed, I think can and may absolutely happen.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, then again to the creator or the administration, do we need a full-time person for a year to do that? Because what was just described to me seems rather simple. If many programs exist in Monroe County, there's at least 2, it sounds like. And if there are others in other counties, seems to me like someone could do this much more quickly and very efficiently.
Through you, Mr. President, I just would like to respond to that. The answer would be that a full-time position is absolutely needed. Someone needs to focus on ensuring that language access is happening and occurring across the board. I think you heard in the comments earlier today how LEP communities continue to be left out and thought about after the fact. With this particular position, policies and procedures will be put in place to ensure that brown communities specifically, are receiving the services in a language that they prefer or in a method that they prefer. It hasn't happened. So I think what you're asking is something that hasn't occurred because no one has focused on doing so.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote or?
Mr. President, I'm sorry, Mr.
Yes.
President, I was muted. This is Legislator Brew. I had one more question.
Go ahead, Legislator Brew.
Okay, given the amount of questions and all of these questions, I must acknowledge were very good questions, and I am hopeful that Legislator Roman, in conjunction with the administration, can address these questions. Our legislative staff will compile the questions that we have put forth tonight, as well as the comments, and get them over to the administration. And our expectation would be that those questions would be responded to in a timely manner so that we could give it a full and proper consideration prior to our next ledge meeting in February. Thank you.
Hearing no further discussion, let's go to a roll call vote.
You want a roll call? Mr. Brew?
Do we need a roll call?
I didn't hear anyone say they were voting no. So.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Oh, that's good. Item carries. Next item.
Item number 3, referral 21-0009, authorize the initiation of the process for making additions to Monroe County agricultural districts.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by Legislator Wilt, seconded by Legislator Boyce. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 4, referral 21-0010, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Division of Homeland Security Emergency Services for the fiscal year 2020 Emergency Management Performance Grant.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Boyce, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Number 5.
Item number 5, referral 21-0011, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Division of Homeland Security Emergency Services for the fiscal year 2020 State Homeland Security Program.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Boyce, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Hebert.
Go ahead, Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through the chair to the administration, is the referral refers to a decrease of $104,000 and change. Is it over the 3-year life of the grant, or is that $104,000 for each individual year?
Through you, Mr. President, I believe we have Director Tantello on the call to answer that, or Deputy Director Henry. Mr. President, I'm not sure if they have their phones muted.
Okay, whatever you need to do, Mr. McCann. Maybe you could call them and let them know maybe their phone is muted.
I'm trying. Through you, Mr. President.
Yes.
Director Tantello, sorry, I problem with the phone. That reduction would be covered over the 3 years of the grant.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, what will the county be changing from previous year grants as far as capabilities go to enable the $35,000 or so a year reduction?
Through you, Mr. President. I apologize for the audio problems. Through you, Mr. President, could Legislator Hebert repeat that, please?
Sure. Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, what will the county be changing from previous years' capabilities, services, whatever, because the grant has been reduced by about $35,000 a year?
Well, we would be, through you, Mr. President, we would be looking at the target programs that we're offering, and through those 6 or 7 operations, we would be able to make minimal reductions associated with that, which we don't believe will impact the level of service that we provide to the community.
Thank you. So a 25% or so reduction in funding means you can continue carrying on as before?
Through you, Mr. President, in analyzing this, we may see some minor reductions in some of the equipment and supplies that are required or that we would be looking at, but nothing that we couldn't move forward with based upon the economy of scale that we're dealing with grants across the board through New York State.
Okay, thank you. If you went through you, Mr. President, to the administration, when you do decide what you would be changing, would you mind telling the legislature in writing or whatever?
Through you, Mr. President, absolutely.
Thank you. I yield the floor, Mr. President.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 6, referral 210012, acceptance of a grant from the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives for the ATF Monroe County Sheriff's Office Explosive Task Force.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Legislator Boyce, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Barworth.
Go ahead, Legislator Barworth. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through your administration, just one quick question. I know the start date for this acceptance of the grant is October 1st, 2019. I'm going to assume that's correct. Will that have any effect on the amount of funding we'll actually receive, or will the funds that we're going to support things in 2019 just will move into the current year's budget? Through the President.
Mr. President, I believe Jennifer Curley from the Sheriff's Office is available to answer that.
Ms. Curley?
Mr. President, I don't know if there's anybody else from the Sheriff's Office who can answer that. If not, maybe we can make a note and ask them to respond to that before full legislature.
Is that okay, Legislator Barrow?
Ms. Curley should be on now. Ms. Curley should be on. She's unmuted.
Okay, Ms. Curley, you should be unmuted. You want to answer that question, please?
Yes, sure. Was on the hold on. Can you still hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So yes, we are just going back to get the appropriations for the 2019 to 2020 period. They failed to give us an award on time, but it's not changing anything going forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. President, Legislator Boyce.
Go ahead, Legislator Boyce. You have the floor.
Yes, through the President. If anybody could answer, how many of the joint explosive investigations are done annually, if they have that number for me?
Through the chair, I can answer that. To the President, can you hear me?
Yes.
We average around over 50 calls a year.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Curley.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 7, referral 21-0013, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services for the Live Scan Equipment Grant Program and authorizing intermunicipal agreements with 8 municipalities within Monroe County.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by legislator Boyce, seconded by legislators Ansello and Delahanty. Is there any discussion on this?
Mr. President, Legislator Barworth.
Go ahead, legislator Barrett, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through you to the administration, does the Monroe County Sheriff's Office have an anticipated timeline or completion date for this records management system to be implemented with our partners?
Through the chair, this is Ginny Verhagen from Public Safety. It's actually a Central Police Services project.
Oops.
We are working in conjunction with the Sheriff's Office, who's doing some of the project management on it, and we're just working together as a collaboration. The scheduled implementation date right now is July of 21.
Okay, thank you very much. It's pretty quick.
Any further question, legislator?
No, thank you. I'm done.
Any further discussion?
Yes, through the President, Legislator Boyce.
Okay, legislator Boyce, you have the floor.
Yes, through the President, once this program is successfully implemented, can we expect this grant to be offered again to Monroe County, or do you think this is a one-time thing? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but.
Through the President, Jennifer here. DCGS has been releasing this grant every year. I don't know if we'll need it in future years, but if needed, we can certainly apply.
Thank you.
Legislator Hebert.
Legislator Hebert.
Quick question, Mr. President, through you to the administration. Did we request the increase? And if so, why did we request it?
I can answer that if you want me to, Jennifer. This is Ginny Verhagen through the President. What happened is we're doing this project, so we applied on behalf of all the other agencies, and it's not really you asked for the number of devices you need, and for the most part, the state has been awarding them based on your request. So at this point, as we're replacing both the records management system and the warrant and fingerprint modules, we want to replace all the devices as well. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, just to clarify through you, Mr. President. So it was a result of the increase in the number of devices we requested that we got the increase in funding.
Through the chair, that is correct. Last year, Jennifer applied and was successful and got, correct me if I'm wrong, 10 for the Sheriff's Office. And then we have we requested on behalf of all the other agencies as well this year.
Great answer. Thank you. I yield the floor, Mr. President.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next.
Item number 8, referral 21-0014, authorize a contract with Keeler Construction Co. Inc. for construction services for the call-controlled culvert project over Red Creek tributary in the town of Henrietta.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By legislator Colby, seconded by legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion on this one?
Legislator Smith.
Go ahead, legislator Smith. You have the floor.
Through the President, what's the reason for the high variance in the bids we've received?
Mr. President, we have Director Pond available to answer that.
Yes, hi. Through the President, this is Director Pond. We do not control bidding. That's, of course, through the contractor's discretion as to how they bid. The engineer's estimate on here is around $390,000. So these are all low bids, except for the bottom one. It has to do with how they approach the project, what work they have, and so forth. Variables we don't control. But looking over the bid, we found it to be reasonable throughout. No no bidding discrepancies.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 9, referral 21-0015, authorize a contract with Villager Construction, Inc. for construction services for the Highway Preventative Maintenance Number 8 project in the towns of Brighton, Gates, Henrietta, Arundecoit, Ogden, Perrington, and Pittsford.
Move it,
Move
Mr.
it,
President.
Mr. President.
Moved by
Second.
legislator Colby, seconded by legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Yes, legislator Colby.
I'm not sure if it's this one or the next referral maybe, but I don't have my notes and I can't manage 3 computers at once here. One of these bids coming up has somebody that withdrew their bid. When that appropriate contract release comes up, could somebody explain why we let them withdraw their bid?
Yep, that's 210017. So we have that
Okay,
when that
thank
item.
you.
So,
I'll ask the question then.
Oh, that was my question.
Oh, sorry.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 10, referral 21-0016, authorize a contract with CP Ward Inc. for construction services for the Lake Road West Fork Bridge project over Sandy Creek in the town of Hamlin.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Legislator Colby, seconded by legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President.
Oh, I'm sorry. Legislator Barra?
Yes, thank you. This is a technical question. Am I correct to understand through you to the administration that part of the repair work here is going to be filling concrete into what is currently steel mesh? Is that correct? And if so, why are we doing that?
Mr. President, Mr. Pond can answer that.
Through the president, what we are doing is we will be placing concrete infill on a portion of the open grate steel deck. So we're putting some concrete in there so it's not open grate, which can cause problems with travel over there, going over the deck. Then the stone fill is going along the stream channel and the asphalt pavement is coming to the approach. But it's to make the deck more durable, to help it to be more rideable rather than the open steel that's currently there. Thank you.
So through the president, just so I understand, so the primary reason for this is to make it more easy to drive over or travel over, not so much to increase durability, although it does that as well.
Through the president, we have considerations such as bicycle riders, motorcyclists and things to consider. Current standards, these open grate bridge steel decks, we do have some now, but on a bridge of this nature, you don't need it. So there's multiple reasons for not continuing with it.
Okay, thank you. I only asked because, well, I started off in the legend, the transportation committees, and so it's my first love, you might say.
Any further discussion?
And I was your chairman then too.
True.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, two referrals ago, you had a good answer for why there was such a high variance and that you had analyzed it and found no problems. Did you do the same for this bid? Because it too had a very high variance in the bids received. And in my experience, those types of things often come from unclear bids where they can be interpreted multiple ways by people in the same business.
Through the president, yes, this was thoroughly vetted to look over each item individually as well as collectively to make sure there were no particular items of extreme low value that should have been higher or the other way around. So we check for balance bidding and that the prices are reasonable. That's part of the bid analysis process, sir.
Thank you. I yield the floor, Mr. President.
Any further discussion?
Mr. President, this is Legislator Brew.
Go ahead, Legislator Brew.
Yes, a question for Director Pond. Being an avid motorcycle rider myself, crossing some of these steel deck bridges at times can be a little bit challenging. And I would imagine for the bicycle riders, they would be even more so. So thank you for doing this. My question is, throughout the county and those bridges that fall under the Monroe County Department of Transportation jurisdiction, do we know how many other bridges remain out there that may need a similar type of improvement?
Through the president, I do not know that offhand. I can get back to you with that information.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 11, referral 21-0017, amend the 2021 capital budget and bond resolution 397 of 2020, provide an increase in funding and authorize a contract with Keeler Construction Company, Inc. for the construction services for the Lake Road 2 project in the town of Webster.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Mr.
I
President.
believe this is your one, Legislator Foley.
Yes, my question is, I stated earlier, why was the one company released of its low bid?
Through the President, this is Chief Deputy County Attorney Laura Smith. Under General Municipal Law 103, subsection 11, there's a 5-part test by which a contractor can withdraw their bids. I'm happy to go through all 5 parts of the test, or I can summarize that when the error in the bid is actually due to an unintentional and substantial arithmetic error or unintentional omission of substantial quantity of work, labor, material, goods, or services made directly in the compilation of the bid. Here, the contractor marked as withdrawing their bid, presented that they had used the incorrect use of place setter factors in making the calculations in their bid. They also made a mistake in transposing the costs and constructing the 2 cofferdams that were required on the project. And last, they failed to carry over a subcontractor's quote for landscaping on the project. Together with these factors, they met the requirements of General Municipal Law 103, subsection 11.
Thank you. A follow-up question then would be, are they looked at differently going forward at all for future bids? I mean, I guess if a company continuously has that issue, would you eventually bar them from bidding? Through you, Mr. President.
Through you, Mr. President, under General Municipal Law, we are limited in what we can do when someone is the lowest responsible bidder. Certainly, if a contractor proved themselves to be non-responsible, decisions could be made by the purchasing department. But within this bid, it's a standalone decision.
Through you, Mr. President, my question was more toward allowing them to be a valid bidder, because they have to be qualified to bid on these projects, I assume. Would you bump somebody off that qualified list if you found them to make these type of errors often? Through you, Mr. President.
Through you, Mr. President, that would put the county at significant legal risk under General Municipal Law 103, but certainly if it was warranted under case law, the purchasing department could make that determination.
Thank you, Mr. President, or staff. I yield the floor.
Legislator Barworth.
Yes, Legislator, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, I understand why Nardozzi Paving was released from the bid, and that is the reason for doing a bid with Keeler. But my question then is, the difference in the 2 bids was about $1.7 million, but the increase in funding is $3.25 million. Why is there that discrepancy? Well, what accounts for the other 1 point whatever it is million?
Through you, Mr. President, I would ask Director Pond to answer that.
Through the president, the difference in the project, besides what you saw, the primary item that is higher is the construction inspection, which is not reflected here, as well as some right-of-way costs. We also have a few other items, such as a wildlife credit fee that we pay, and the design was previously spent. So the biggest item not seen there is the construction inspection. It's a 2-year project, so it's a fair amount of money to do that.
Okay, but then through the president, isn't that a normal part of the bidding process that would be included in the bid price for the project, or am I incorrect in that assumption?
Through the president, the bid price is for the contractor work only.
Okay.
The other items are done by others.
Okay. So here's the part that's throwing me. What you're telling me then is that for any given contract that involves construction that might have a construction inspection process and other things, that we could anticipate additional increases in the referrals on bids or bidding approvals, or is that like we just put it in here because it was coming towards the ledge anyhow, and normally it would have gone another route to put in those additional costs? Would that be the case through the president?
Through the president, we actually had those costs anticipated originally, but it was thought to be a 1-year project. And so construction inspection going to a 2-year project basically doubled. And there were quite a few other items that are detailed in the referral that caused the prices to go up. So we thought we had this all covered originally. By the time we got into detailed design, we realized the price was going to be high. But at that point, it was too late to get it adjusted in the previous CIP. So we unfortunately compounded several problems and come before you today with a fairly high jump. That's unusual for us.
Okay, I appreciate that. You know, I just got thrown by the distinction, the differentiation between those two amounts. But I'm happy to support this, and I'll be voting in favor. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Yep, Mr. President, this is Legislator Brew.
Go ahead, Legislator Brew.
To the President, to the administration. My question is, actually I have a couple questions. What was the county's total budgeted amount for this project, if you might? I'm sorry, I apologize if I should have this information in front of me. I'm just looking at the referral.
Through the president, the original budget is approved by the legislature, was $7,250,000. Thank
you. And another question, if I may, through the president to the administration, and that's one of a process-related question, in that the bids are received. There's obviously a vast discrepancy between Nardozzi and the next highest bidder. Now, are those discrepancies discovered during a county D-scope meeting with the low bidder, or are they normally discovered and offered by the low bidder itself, proactively informing the county that they were in error in the component of their bids? Could you just give me a brief description of how the discrepancies are identified, and just let us know about that, if you would, please?
Through the president, what we do is we have a consultant on board that goes through item by item the bid to see a number of things. They compare the engineer's estimate to individual items. They compare to make sure that the person understood what they were doing. There's also a check when there is a individual discrepancy. They further investigate to see what the causes may be. I get a thorough write-up back from the consultant explaining each and every item, why they thought they might be high or low. And they also go back again to the engineer's budget so that we could see what's going on. Now, in the case of Nardozzi, they contacted us immediately and said there's a problem with our bid. So we didn't even get through the thorough process that we normally would with their bid. They immediately contacted to say there's something wrong. The law department went over the process from there.
Okay, through the president, the administration, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Great. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 12, referral 21-0018, authorize a contract with Accent Stripe Inc. for construction services for the Monroe County Pedestrian Safety Action Plan project.
Move it, Mr. President.
By Legislator
Second.
Colby, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President?
Yes,
Legislator Burrow.
Legislator Brough.
Yes. Just one quick question. The referral indicates that there's about 250 locations. Do we know what those locations are right now, or are those yet to be determined through the president?
For the president, we do know each and every location. They've been identified. We have a couple of items or locations we're still tweaking, but there's a firm list of where they are right now.
Thank you. And through the president, I'm assuming they're spread out throughout the county?
Through the president, yes, they are. They're all throughout the county.
Thank you.
Legislator Smith,
Go ahead, Legislator Smith, you have the floor.
to go on what Legislator Broth just asked, would we be able to get a list of all of those 250 locations sent to the legislators?
Through the president, yes.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question. Through the president, why did we only receive one bid for this project?
Through the president, that's a good question. We don't control the bidding. And actually, we had made an attempt earlier where we got no bids and we had to divide the bids up differently. And this time we got only one. The most likely reason is because of the specialty nature of this work. Very few contractors do this type of work, and not all of them are local. So I would like to have gotten more than one bid, but we ended up with just the one bid, which is a reasonable one, fortunately.
Thank you.
When you only get one bid, can you reach out to a contractor that does to provide that type of service and ask for a bid?
Through the president, procurement law has to be followed carefully. So if you have already gotten a public bid that's been opened, that can be seen by others, I don't believe you can go out and start to contact another bidder who did not bid on it and ask them for, say, a better price or something else.
No, what I'm saying is if you only know you have one bid that came in before you open it, could you seek out another bid?
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Mr. President,
I'm happy to jump in. This is Laura Smith, Chief Deputy County Attorney. Through the President, no. Under General Municipal Law 103, the sealed bids is a regulated process. Once bids are open, the bidding process is closed.
Gotcha. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Item carries. Next.
Item number 13, referral 21-0019, amend resolution 151 of 2012 as amended by resolution 52 of 2020 to accept additional funding from the New York State Department of Health and extend the time period for the Beach Act program.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by Legislator, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next.
Item number 14, referral 21-0020, amend resolution 314 of 2017 as amended by resolution 244 of 2020 to accept additional funding from the New York State Department of Health and extend the time period for nutrition programs.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by Legislator Smith, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, pardon?
Legislator Smith.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Legislator Smith.
It's okay. Through the president, what was the annual amount received in past years?
Mr. President, I believe we have Kathy Kerlock on the call to answer that.
Yes, through the president. I can give you the total amount of the grant. I would have to go back and look at each individual year to break it down, but the total, the extended grant, which has been extended now from 5 years to 7 years, the total amount is $16,055,871, and it is approximately evenly divided over the 7 years.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Great. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? And carries. Next.
Item number 15, referral 21-0021, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Department of Health for the local health department support for flu and COVID-19 response program, and amend Resolution 128 of 2019 as amended by Resolution 290 of 2020 to amend the authorized term of a contract with Reliant Staffing Systems, Inc., DBA Career Start, to provide nursing and health care provider services from Monroe County Department of Public Health.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Smith, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Hebert.
Go ahead, Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, can the county anticipate receiving this grant going into the future?
Mr. President, I believe Kathy Kerlock can also speak to this referral.
Yes, through the president. This is a new grant for us, and we really don't know for sure if this is going to be extended going into the future. It was provided to us last year and allowed us to increase some of our flu outreach last fall.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, how many individuals can we anticipate receiving the vaccine for influenza or COVID-19 with the funds being awarded?
Through the president. So I can't give you an exact number right now. I could look that up and see if I could come up with it, but I can describe how the funds were used. We participated with other partners in some of the flu clinics that you might have been aware of in the churches that took place last fall. We provided the vaccine and a clinical coordinator for each site each day. We participated, we actually did teaching. We taught in the shelters how they could do their own COVID testing so that they could get a handle on some of the outbreaks that they were having during the last few months. That was related to COVID, which is also part of the grant. And we did 3, I think, outreach clinics to shelters in the fall. Needless to say, some of our outreach for flu was interfered with just a little by the work we were doing with COVID at the same time. Otherwise, we might have done several more shelter outreach events for flu vaccine.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. Do you have, I don't want you to do a ton of work to answer this question. Do you have any idea at all how many individuals, I mean, you said there were 3 events held. Roughly how many individuals were cared for in these events?
Through the president, the vaccine that was given at the shelters probably took care of about 100 homeless individuals. That's an estimate. And I think that I could probably get you numbers for the individuals that got flu vaccine at the churches.
All right, thank you. I'll accept that. Last question through you, Mr. President. Is the county pursuing any other grants to cover COVID costs related to vaccinations or anything else you can identify?
Through the president, yes, there are multiple funding streams that are attached to COVID, and yes, we are pursuing whatever we can.
Through you, Mr. President, could someone in the administration please provide a list of those to the legislature, all members?
Through the president, we can do that.
Thank you. I yield the floor, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 16, referral 21-0022, amending Resolution 380 of 2018 as amended by Resolution 214 of 2019 to amend and increase contract with Reliant Staffing Systems, Inc., DBA Career Start to include provision of registered nurses to supervise and manage nursing or support staff in Monroe County Department of Public Health COVID-19 response units.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Smith, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Barr.
I think Legislator Smith just beat you out just a little bit, Legislator Barra.
No problem.
Through the President to the administration, how many additional staff will this additional funding provide?
Mr. President, Kathy Carlock can also speak to this referral.
Through the President, this funding actually is in addition to other funding that we're using for this same contract with Career Start Reliant. And this actually allows us to give a slightly higher rate of pay to several nurses who will function as team leads and managers, because as the COVID response has increased, our staffing has increased tremendously and we're having trouble managing it. So we anticipate that this funding will allow us to fund or fund by additional increase in pay in order to get up the higher level of staffing we need, approximately 5 to 6 nurses.
Thank you.
Okay, Legislator
Mr.
Barra.
President,
Thank you.
Legislator Barra had the floor next.
Thanks. I just have a question regarding the contract. The language in the contract through the President indicates that we're now going to include a provision out there that the RNs are can supervise and manage nursing or support staff in the response units. Were they not allowed to do that prior, or is that a question more greater efficiency, or why is this being included now?
Through the President, they, as RNs, they are certainly allowed, it's within their scope of practice to provide this level of supervision. However, the rate of pay that we provide for in our base contract is not enough to hire nurses who are willing to take on that added responsibility. So this allows us to boost their pay up by $2 to $3 per hour, which will then encourage them to take on the higher level role.
Thank you, it makes sense.
Thank you. Was that Legislator Boyce that wanted the floor next?
yes, thank you, Mr. President. I just have a question. I see Ms. Carlock is on the phone. Can you identify what your position at the county is, please?
Yes, through the President. My normal position at the county is that I am the Division Manager for Maternal and Child Health Services. I also, that was a full-time job before COVID happened. In the COVID response, I'm also the deputy for the operations section of the COVID response. And so I oversee a number of teams who are participating in our COVID response in the department.
Thank you, Ms. Carlock. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 17, referral 21-0023, acceptance of a grant from New York State Office for the Aging and authorize a contract with Lifespan of Greater Rochester, Inc. for the New York State Elder Abuse Education and Outreach Program.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Smith, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Legislator Boyce.
Go ahead, Legislator Boyce, you have the floor.
Yes, can through the President, can you ask, or can you tell me how their Lifespan is now providing the services to the seniors given the pandemic?
Mr. President, we have Commissioner Wright and Steve Newcomb available to answer to speak to this referral.
Through the President, some activities are taking place via Zoom right now. There's been limited one-on-one meetings per se. There's monthly meetings by the EMDT team that takes place via Zoom, and there's daily communication between all staff involved in this program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Legislator Smith,
Go ahead, Legislator Smith.
through the president to the administration, what will the remaining $38,250 be used for?
Through the president, some of that is our administrative cost as well as cost to monitor the program, which an Office for Aging Monitor does, and that's where those dollars go. That's the difference.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 18, referral 21-0024, amend the 2021-2026 capital improvement program to advance the airport snow removal equipment building project at the Greater Rochester International Airport from 2026, 2024, and 2023 to 2021, and increase the project authorization. Amend the 2021 capital budget to add a project titled Airport Snow Removal Equipment SRE Building, authorize financing for the project, and authorize a contract with Pastoral Associates Engineering, Architecture, and Surveying, DPC, for design services for the project.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by Legislator Doctorfer, seconded by Legislator Wilt. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 19, referral 21-0025, confirmation the appointment of the Director of Transportation.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Colby, seconded by Legislator Ansello. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Any opposed? Carries. Next item.
Item number 20, referral 21-0026, confirmation of the appointment of the Director of the Office of Public Integrity.
Move it, Mr. President. Second.
By Legislator Delahanty, seconded by Legislator Hebert. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 21, referral 21-0027, authorizing interfund transfer from the general fund to the road fund to offset 2020 operating expenses.
Move it, Mr. President. Second.
Moved by Legislator Delahanty, seconded by Legislator Hebert. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Barth.
Go ahead, Legislator Barth.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, we're simply doing this to make more clear in the operating budget what's going where. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President, that is a reasonable summary.
All right, thank you.
Any further discussion?
Legislator DeFlorio?
Go ahead, Legislator DeFlorio.
Yeah, through the chair, through the president to the administration. I know we did some adjustments in the budget where snow and ice were changed from being below the line to above the line. Was this transfer envisioned at that time or planned at that time?
Mr. President, it was contemplated but not really decided. And in reviewing our current year-end position for 2020, we have reasonable basis to ascertain that there are sufficient resources within the general fund to make this transfer for the 2020 financial statements.
So through the president to the administration, I guess I'm wondering if there hadn't been sufficient funds in the general fund, how would we have funded this without saying too many funds?
Mr. President, we would not have.
So how would we have paid for it then, I guess is what I'm wondering, through the president?
Mr. President, these expenses were all incurred in 2020 and all have been paid for. This is a request for you to simply transfer cash from the general fund to reimburse the road fund.
Okay, so there, through the president, there would have been, for lack of a better, there would have been a hole in the road fund budget had we not had those funds to transfer.
At this time, Mr. President, that's probably true. I can't say tonight with certainty it's 100% true.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Yes, Legislator Brew, Mr. President.
Go ahead, Legislator Brew.
Yeah, as discussed before, it's been mentioned that there has been an additional tax levy upon the city residents, whereas before they were not taxed for county road snow and ice removal. So what I would like to know is, do we know what the total tax levy is to the city of Rochester residents, right, that are supporting the county's fund in regard to this?
Mr. President, that question was asked a number of times at the various budget hearings in December, particular Ways and Means Committee, and at that committee, I presented this as not an additional tax to the residents of the city of Rochester, but rather because they had not been taxed for snow and ice in the past, they would not save any money on their tax bill. Since the residents of the various suburban municipalities are the ones who paid the snow and ice tax, they are the ones who saved the most. I would also say that the legislature requested and was provided a breakdown of the county tax levy for each municipality prior to the December vote. We can dig up our response and provide that a second time if it is so needed, Mr. President.
Through the president to the administration. So, okay, was there a total tax levy indicated in that previous response that is now being charged to city residents?
I'm sorry, Mr. President, I'm struggling to understand the question. Was there a tax levy for, I guess I would just have to ask Mr. President if the question could be repeated or restated.
Okay, let me try to restate this. It is my understanding that the city of Rochester residents are now paying a portion of the county snow and ice removal. Okay, my question is not what their current tax levy is and whether it's gone down, because it was explained to me that all of the current city residents, based upon the new tax rates, they have fallen. My question is, what is the total amount of the tax levy, okay, the charge to the city residents regarding the snow and ice removal? Am I being clear?
I think so, Mr. President. The city of Rochester residents are being taxed about $64.4 million. I guess it's a real difficult question to answer. I can tell you that the budget for 2021 snow and ice removal is approximately $5.3 million. It's not fair to say it would be an academic exercise to try and apportion that $5.3 million, but it's one we can do for you, Mr. President.
I would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral to 1-0028, authorize Monroe County to submit funding applications to federal, state, and/or non-for-profit funding assistance programs.
Move it, Mr. President.
By Legislator Dondorfer, seconded by Legislator Wilt. Is there any discussion on this?
Yes, Mr. President. Legislator Boyce.
Go ahead, Legislator Boyce, you have the floor.
Yes, through the president to the administration. Is this something new that we've done in the past and I don't remember? I just don't recall us doing this before.
Through you, Mr. President, this is Mike Garland, DES Director. Yes, this is the fourth time that we've made this annual request authorizing county departments the ability to submit applications. that does not allow the county to, authorize the county to accept those without your approval, but it authorizes us to be able to submit applications.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garland.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 23, referral 21-0030, classification of action, determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act for construction of a snow removal equipment SRE building on vacant lands currently owned by Monroe County.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by Legislator Dondor, seconded by Legislator Wilt. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Barth.
Yes, Legislator Barth.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, I tend to ask why things are matters of importance or urgency, and I know this one is because of the airport authority basically fast tracking a project that they need to get fast track federal funding to come through. My only question regarding this matter of importance is, assuming, I'm going to assume that the sequel will come back positively, but if it doesn't, will that negatively impact the timeline that the airport has set forth for the project?
Through you, Mr. President, this is Mike Well, Construction Project Manager at the airports. That's a good question. I don't anticipate any schedule delays. The Seeker Act is acting independently.
Excuse me, Mr. President, this is Jeff McCann. This referral is a matter of importance because when it was originally submitted, there was a typographical error in the year that said 2020. It was rejected by the legislature clerk's office, and we needed to resubmit it. It was all the same except for the year, and as a result of that, it's before you as a matter of importance.
Thank you for that clarification. It's appreciated.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? Next item, 24.
Item number 24, referral 21-0031, amend Resolution 111 of 2016 as amended by Resolution 315 of 2020 to amend and increase the contract with URMC Labs, Division of the University of Rochester for laboratory services at Monroe Community Hospital.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Legislator Smith, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Legislator Hasman.
Yes, I'd like to declare my interest.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Legislator Barth.
Yes, Legislator Barra.
Thank you. I understand perfectly why this is a matter of importance. We need to get this done as quickly as possible. My question is, do we know what the frequency of resident testing of MCH is right now and how much it might be increased through the President?
Mr. President, I believe Alyssa Tallow is available to answer that.
Through the President, CMS put a regulation in place in September that requires for any outbreak, which is considered one positive staff member or resident, that you should test residents every 3 to 7 days until a negative. There are no more positives for 14 days. In December, when the community started to see an increase in cases, residents were also impacted with that, and in collaboration with the State Department of Health, we start to increase testing on units if we would see a resident positive, closer to that 3-day range versus the 7-day range.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item carries. Are there any other matters to come before the Committee of the Whole?
Legislator Hebert.
Yes, Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a number of questions for the administration, starting with a few on the CARES Act 3.0 funds from this past March. First question, what is the unencumbered balance in CARES 3.0 Act funding? By that, I mean the amount of available funds that are not committed to anything at this point in time.
Mr. President, to you, This is not an agenda item. We're not in a position to answer these questions this evening, and particularly, they're not related to an agenda item. What I would also like to ask as a courtesy is that if legislators would refrain from contacting department heads directly. This is something that we have asked repeatedly about. We've asked that any correspondence that legislators have go through Mr. Crum or Dawn Broking. It just helps us keep track of these inquiries and also be aware of what the inquiries are, so we can help coordinate the response. So I would respectfully ask that legislators honor that that long-standing process that has gone back numerous administrations and something that we've asked for repeatedly through Mr. President.
Oh, okay, I could understand that, but I believe this question is appropriate under other matters. Mr. McCann?
Mr. President, is it related to an agenda item? I thought it had to be related to an agenda item, and I believe Legislator Hebert has a laundry list of questions.
It doesn't have to be related to an agenda item under other matters.
Okay, we are not in a position to answer these questions tonight, Mr. President.
Well, he hasn't asked the question yet, Mr. McCann.
I believe he did, Mr. President.
He said he's got a slew of questions. Is that true? Is that so, Legislator Hebert?
Yes, I have a number of questions. And as far as Mr. McCann saying not to contact the department head, I actually did so today so that they would be enabled to answer the questions. So I'm not quite sure the complexity of this. It seems like how much of the 129.4 million is left unencumbered should be a fairly easy question to answer, given that you had several hours notice.
Through you, Mr. President, we have other duties and responsibilities that we enact as part of our daily business besides responding to.
Mr. McCann, I get you don't want to answer the question. Can you get him that answer?
Yeah, no, of course we can, Mr. President. That was the point. They were submitted in writing. We can do that. I'm asking as a courtesy that anything be directed to Mr. Crum or Dawn Broking, as we've asked repeatedly and has gone back. I worked for the Fry administration in the late 80s, and that was the practice back then. So this isn't anything new. We would like these questions to come in a coordinated manner so that we can be aware of them and respond to them. We will be happy to respond to them in writing, but to basically take 45 minutes as we have in past instances answering questions that have nothing to do with the agenda is something we're not prepared to do tonight. We will be glad to respond to the questions in writing.
We've already established that questions on other matters don't have to apply to the agenda. We've already established that.
Okay, Mr. President, in the 11 years I was in that body, that was always what, any other matters, anything that come before this committee was never a question when I was a member of the legislature for 11 years. That has changed at some point within the last year, but that's up to you and that's up to your discretion. So I'll just want to point that out now.
Through you, Mr. President, one of the reasons I tried to ask these tonight, Mr. McCann, is that I have written letters before and been promised answers, and the answers that I get are incomplete. They are sometimes not even related to the question, in my view. And I thought that by doing so this way, we would be able to go back and forth more quickly, because I also tend not to get answers in what I consider a reasonable time frame. Could you tell me when you'll be able to answer these questions?
Well, I guess we have a difference of opinion of what, through you, Mr. President, of what's a reasonable time frame. We have staff here who are working on vaccine distributions, COVID testing, and a number of other things. We will have an answer for you as soon as we can. I would anticipate that we would have an answer before the legislature meeting. I will talk with staff here, but to expect us to turn around and be in a position to respond to a laundry list of questions that are not related to anything on the agenda tonight, I think is unreasonable, and we will be glad to respond to them in writing as soon as we can.
through you, Mr. President, to the administration. I'm terribly disappointed in the what I consider Mr. McCann's past precedent answer. This is in fact different times, and I thought this administration was coming in to do things in a new and better way. Apparently, this is not considered a better way, being responsive to the legislature. I will await the responses, and I hope you get them to me as soon as possible.
Through you, Mr. President, I myself leave these meetings disappointed many times myself, so thank you.
Why are you disappointed, Mr. McCann? No, that's okay, but never mind. The committee of the whole stands adjourned and shall rise and report in the same matter as the legislature standing committees. The January 26, 2021 special meeting of the legislature is reconvened. We will now continue with the consideration of motions, resolutions, and notices. Next item.
Item number 25, referral 21-0005, amending 2021 Monroe County budget to authorize an increase to Veteran Service Agency budget to add additional county service position and implement pilot ecotherapy program for veterans.
Move it, Mr. President.
By Legislator Hebert, seconded by Legislator Alcoffer, Wilt, and Mafucci. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Hebert.
Go ahead, Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish I could be briefer, but I wish to explain my vote. I'm very happy to be joined by my fellow legislators, former Army Sergeant Frank Alcoffer and former Air Force Sergeant Ed Wilt, in pursuing passage of this referral. As a retired United States Navy commander, I am proud to be involved in many different efforts to support our 35,000 fellow veterans in Monroe County. I'd also like to thank my colleague Howard Mafucci from the Democratic Caucus of the Legislature, who proudly seconded and has supported this referral from its inception. Simply put, this referral means Monroe County veterans will be better supported and served. This legislation will provide additional needed staff at the Veterans Service Agency. It will also facilitate the implementation of a pilot therapy program with proven success in enhancing the outcomes for veterans suffering from PTSD and other afflictions. This program is proven and reduces veteran suicide, addiction rates, and provides other benefits to participants. And working with and talking to veterans, as well as my own personal experiences, I'm aware of the services and community support that is most critical to local veterans and their families. For those of you who are not veterans, please try to remember that the veteran's family also served our country. Maybe not on the front line, but their support is critical to the success of the veteran. Helping the veterans means you help their mother and father, their husband and wife, as well as their children and extended family of any of the veterans served. The Monroe County Veterans Service Agency and the Veterans Outreach Center are both critical resources for our veteran community. Each provides unique services and has areas of particular expertise. We're lucky to have both of these organizations in our county, providing critical support to our vets. This referral adds one Monroe County Veterans Services officer to the VSA staff. This person will be assigned to work at the Veterans Outreach Center. That's unusual, but it will ensure a skilled liaison is on site at the VOC, ready to offer help and directions to veterans. Why is that needed? It's essential for veterans who visit the VOC, which is the better known of the two agencies. Many come there looking for help with Veterans Administration claims, only to be directed to go to the Veterans Service Agency. The reason for that is the VSA service officers are particularly expert in assisting vets with Veterans Administration claims, which are often complex and can literally take many years to reach a decision. They have succeeded in bringing millions of dollars in VA awards to our veterans in Monroe County, and I want to applaud the VSA for that support. But a vet who's at the VOC being told help is at a different office is often a barrier to the veteran seeking assistance. Many simply never show up for help at the VSA. The second part of this legislation provides funding from Monroe County to start a pilot program through our VSA to begin offering ecotherapy services to our veterans who require it. Many of these vets will be referred from the Veterans Outreach Center. What is ecotherapy? It, in short, is a progressive form of therapy and counseling incorporating the great outdoors in the treatment of individuals suffering from PTSD, addiction, and other conditions. The implementation of the ecotherapy pilot program will introduce the use of this groundbreaking therapy method to veterans in need. When the pilot is successful, and I am very confident it will be, as it has proven to be in Western Europe and 4 states on our West Coast, this program will pave the way for the use of ecotherapy in treating non-veterans since it has also proven effective for those with PTSD, anxiety, depression, and addiction, regardless of where those problems came from. The battered wife, the abused child, and many more people will benefit from passage of this referral. I want to note this legislation would not have been possible without the creation of the Community Contingency Fund as part of the 2021 budget. This fund was established for exactly this purpose, to address the needs of our community and its citizens quickly and efficiently. Our veterans are a source of strength and stability. In Monroe County, it is our responsibility to ensure they receive the necessary support when they come home to provide for their well-being. I know this legislation is greatly needed in providing for our community's veterans. I expect it will be passed unanimously by our legislators and promptly signed into action by our county executive so we can start these services as soon as the weather supports that. And I thank them in advance for their support. I am proud to have introduced this and to vote to approve this referral. Thank you, and I yield the floor.
Thank you, Legislator Hebert. Any further discussion?
Legislator Lamar.
Yep, Legislator Lamar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And through you, I just want to make a statement. As a granddaughter of a World War II vet and the stepdaughter of a Vietnam vet, I wish this service was available when I was growing up. Maybe the 4th of July would have been more celebrational. I think that this service is definitely needed. I totally support it. And I thank Legislator Hebert for introducing it to the body, to the legislative body, in order to service our vets better. Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator
Legislator Morelli.
Legislator Morelli, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few quick questions to the maker of the motion. Through you, Mr. President, do we have a full job description for this position that could be shared with the legislators?
I believe through you, Mr. President, I believe we do. I believe it is in the possession of the VSA director who would have to get that to you. Is Mr. Stavanovich on the line?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, we do. That position is an existing position that has existed since the inception of the agency, so that would be something that we could very easily send.
Excellent. That would be great. Thank you. And through you, Mr. President, in terms of funding for this position, can you tell us where this money is coming from?
I believe, through you, Mr. President, I believe the question was, where is the funding coming from? It's coming from the Community Contingency Program that was passed as part of the budget, having overridden the county executive veto on it.
Okay, so I guess I just have some concerns that I believe were brought up by other members of this body as it pertained to other positions. So just so I understand, this is going to be used from the contingency fund, which ultimately is a 1-year fund put together. And so perhaps there's a different use for this or a different place where this position could be funded out of. I mean, if I'm correct in the thinking behind other members of this legislature, this is not where we're suggesting the money come from. Is that correct, Mr. Hebert?
Through you, Mr. President, to Mr. Morelli. No, I think this is radically different than the proposal for someone who would be on board for a long time. This is to fund a pilot program. It is my distinct hope that it will be as successful in Monroe County as it's been on 4 United States West Coast states and throughout Western Europe. Assuming it is, I would expect the county to then make a decision to pick it up and to expand it beyond veterans to include people like battered women and abused children who also have proven to have much higher success rates from counseling when it's done through these ecotherapy approaches.
Okay, so just to clarify then, this is a program that will be funded through this for just the single year. Is that correct?
That's correct. Actually, it'll be funded for 3 specific cohorts of people. That's what the funding will cover. Cohorts consist of typically 12 to 15 people. They meet 2 times a week on average for at least 3 hours per meeting. and they do so in the great outdoors, Mr. Morelli.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Hebert. And finally, my last question is, given that this position would be filled not in the beginning of the year, which would mean that it wouldn't need the full 12-month funding, I suppose. Are we going to reduce the amount that we're allocating for this? Because, you know, it's soon to be February, and, you know, I guess at that point it would only need 11 months worth of funding, as has been suggested in other programs.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Morelli. Through you, Mr. President, I will have to pass that to the administration. I think we're talking about 1/12 of $57,000. I certainly would be amenable to that if that's appropriate. But
I think
the answer would have to come from the administration.
If I could just then clarify, obviously, I assume that there's going to be some requirement or some time that will pass before we're actually able to fill the position. So potentially it could be, you know, March, I suppose. So now we're talking about reduced amount. So just to clarify, if the position isn't filled right away, then I suppose it wouldn't need the full funding. Is that correct?
Legislator Morelli, not to interrupt you, but I think the clerk has the answer to your question. Mr. Moffett.
Per the referral, it states funding appropriated for this position is contemplated on a tentative March 1st, 2021 hire date, includes funding for salary, retirement, Social Security contributions, medical insurance, and dental insurance. Full year funding for this position is estimated to be $56,535, not accounting for any contractual pay increases or cost of living adjustments.
And Mr. President, if I may add, the VSA service officer is not a new position at all. There are already, I believe, 6 of them in the Veteran Service Agency that are working under this same job description, and this is just adding another one. So there is no CS, civil service workup required, et cetera.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Legislator Morelli?
Sorry, Mr. President, did you ask me a question?
Yeah, I said any further questions, Legislator Morelli?
No, through you, Mr. President, if I could explain my vote.
Go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you. As I think we all have witnessed over the past few weeks, the importance of the men and women in uniform who perform just beyond heroic acts. We look, as children, we often look up to superheroes, and when in fact we have superheroes around us every day in our law enforcement and in our men and women of the armed forces. And to that degree, I too would like to thank the members of this legislature who have served in the armed forces, including Legislator Elkoffer and Legislator Hebert, and thank them for their service. And furthermore, just as we've seen out of Washington in the last few weeks, as our Capitol was under attack and the symbol of our democracy was challenged by political members, it was our men and women in armed forces who stopped it and ultimately did an incredible job in protecting our democracy. And I know we've all seen the images of last week's inauguration, and just the sheer number of, whether they were National Guard or other members of different branches of the military, just the selflessness of those men and women. And so anything we can do on our end to make sure that when they come home, they have the services that they need, I think is extremely important. We certainly owe them a debt of gratitude. And so with that, and furthermore, it is something obviously very close to us at home. We lost 3 members of the Army National Guard our community last week, and our thoughts and prayers are certainly with their families, as we have seen for perhaps too close, that even when just performing practice exercises is still very dangerous work that they perform, and they're just always prepared to protect our nation. So we thank them for that. Our thoughts and prayers are with the men who, the families of the 3 men that lost their lives, and I will be voting in favor of this. And I thank Mr. Hebert for his work on it.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Legislator Alcoffer.
Legislator Alcoffer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted I wasn't going to say anything, but I wanted to share my feelings on the ecotherapy program. It works. How do I know? Because I participate in the program. The program that I participate in is out of county. It's in Livingston County. And a small group of us veterans, we meet monthly. It does save lives. I can't put it any other way. It just, to get together with other veterans that have gone through some tough times in the past, it just means so much to us when we can get together, when we can hug one another and just share our feelings openly. So again, I want to thank all the legislators that supported this program, especially George, who carried the ball on this, Ed Wilt from our legislative group. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator Alcoffer.
Legislator Baines, Mr. President.
Go ahead, Legislator Baines.
Legislator Alcoffer, I'm deeply moved by your remarks. Thank you.
Yes.
Earlier this evening, we were considering an expenditure under the heading of the contingency fund, and remarks were made about hypocrisy, that people would support a proposal under this contingency fund not having voted for the contingency fund. And I'd like to address that and then explain my vote as it relates to this matter, which falls under the same category. I voted against the contingency fund multiple times. And if I'm reelected and it comes back up in 2022, I'll be voting against it again. And if I don't vote against it then, that'll be hypocritical. But when a supermajority put together their political power behind this, they made the game. The game is played this way. There's $2.5 million worth of taxpayer money that is in this contingency fund. I personally, under principle, don't think this is how we should do business. In fact, earlier, the questions that were directed toward Legislator Roman were along the lines of, why isn't the administration doing this? And of course, the entire premise of the contingency fund, articulated by those who supported it, was that legislators know better. Now, it seems to me you can't have it both ways. Now, as far as this matter is concerned, I have been deeply impressed by Legislator Hebert, even though I think that this entire program needs to be sustainable. And I am anxious that we will do good work and not be able to sustain it. But I'll be voting yes for this. It's not an act of hypocrisy. These are the rules of the game that were made by the supermajority. And now each of us has a duty to examine on the merits all the proposals that come forward. And I think that Legislator Hebert and Legislators Alcoffer, Wilt, and Mafucci are to be commended for bringing forward a proposal that, within the rules of the game, meets the standards set forth by Majority Leader Brew when he articulated this vision. And I also think that we are blessed to have Ms. Legislator Hasman and Legislator Roman as well come forward with a value-added proposal. So I would like to think that this legislature could tone down
the use of words like hypocrite, or at least, as an English teacher, I like language to be precise. I think the language should be a little more precise, because that's not an accurate word. And I'll be voting to support this, and with great enthusiasm and appreciation for its sponsors. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Legislator Felder.
Go ahead, Legislator Felder.
I don't know what other word to use for hypocrite, but I'll try to find another one. The problem I have with Legislator Baines' entire diatribe he just came forth with, it's like he called this a game. This is not a game. This is serious business. I'm all in favor of. I'm not against Legislator Roman's proposal. I just pointed out the fact that of what actually happened, that it was called a slush fund and everything else, and so that's the reality that happened. Now, as far as the merits of her proposal, I'm going to support it one way or the other. Whether money comes from the contingency fund or it comes from somewhere else, I'm going to support the proposal because it's necessary. But when we start trying to this tit for tat stuff, and this is what kills politics and makes people hate politics, where everything is a game, everything is you should kill my dog, I'll kill your cat. We can't do business like that. And when people are constantly looking for a political advantage rather than just trying to do what's right for the people, and coming up with all these negative comments and accusatory comments and things, and then flip back on the other side and do the same thing they said someone else was doing that was wrong. That's what makes politics bad. That's what's wrong in Washington, D.C. And I would hope that we would keep it out of the Monroe County Legislature, because it doesn't serve anybody's interest.
Thank you, Legislator Felder.
Legislator Hebert.
Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to make a couple comments on Legislator Baines's comments and point a couple things out for his awareness, because I suspect he's not aware of this. You said that the contingency fund was formed because the legislature knew better. I don't believe that was the case. And if that had been the case, I'm not sure I would have supported it. I believe it was because we felt that the legislature has different priorities. In the case of this veterans proposal, I want you to be aware that the administration was fully aware of ecotherapy programs, and in fact had received a briefing on them prior to bringing the budget to the legislature. They chose not to include it. Because of the contingency fund, and it sounds like everybody else here, does support it. So I believe that's the reason that we created the contingency fund, not because the legislature knows better, but because we have different priorities. Thank you, Mr. President.
Legislator Roman.
Legislator Roman, you have the floor.
Yes, I'd like to explain my vote. I will be voting in favor of this, but when we discuss the contingency fund and we discuss the reality of it being controlled by the supermajority, I want to bring to light the amount of questions that were asked of both proposals that were submitted today. We spent a really long time digesting language access, something that is vitally important. I'd say even important to some of the veterans that will access the services that Legislator Herbert is talking about. That is the issue with this contingency fund. I will continue to advocate for the community that's asking for things. But as a governing body, I suggest that we scrutinize, ask questions, and ensure that we are allowing all legislators the opportunity to advocate for the communities that they represent. So, thank you.
Thank you, Legislator Roman. Any further discussion?
Legislator Brew.
Legislator Brew.
Yes, Mr. President, and I echo Legislator Roman's remarks. This is still taxpayer money, regardless of what fund it's coming from. In regard to the language access referral, there were many questions that we simply did not know the answer to. And if it is suggested that we were drilling down to a level that was uncomfortable or asking more questions than maybe someone thought we should have, I think they have to reconsider their tact. because again, we are the stewards of the taxpayers' money. We have to do due diligence in asking the questions, even if they may sound political. And I would think more so that they did not than they did. But it may be construed that way. But everything needs to be entirely vetted by this legislative body to enable us to make an educated decision regarding our votes. So yes, there's no dumb questions. There's no amount of questions that are too many. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to the taxpayers. We owe it to our constituents to do due diligence in asking those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator Brew. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Number 26.
Item number 26, referral 21-0034, confirming appointment of Monroe County Board of Ethics.
Move it, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Taylor, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion on this item?
Legislator Barnhart.
Who was that?
Legislator Barnhart.
Okay, Legislator Barnhart, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through the president to the administration, what is the status of the Ethics Board investigation into the sexual harassment allegations against legislator Ernest Flagler Mitchell?
That's not a relevant topic.
Point of order.
It is relevant because we are appointing a member. I'd like to know if how.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Well,
Ethics board including the third person. So that's what that's
Mr. President.
We're going to have a vote
Legislator
on that.
Lamar.
On the record.
Legislator
Mr.
Lamar.
President,
No, I have the floor. I have the floor. And
I believe Legislator Lamar called the point of our order. She's entitled to do that, Legislator Barnhart. You know the rules. Go ahead, Legislator Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Although I'm not negating the fact of what Legislator Barnhart is saying, I think that we have numerous investigations before this one. And so while I do support an investigation into the allegations against Legislator Flagler Mitchell, I think that we need to take care of all of the investigations and not put one in front of the other.
It's not a point of order. I asked how this appointment is impacting the this investigation. I want to know the status of it. I appreciate Legislator Lamar.
How can you know the status of it if we haven't even dealt with the other investigations?
Not interrupt me. Now,
what'd you say?
If you would like to make a ruling, I would like to appeal it if you're not going to allow this discussion to proceed.
Yeah, I don't think it's pertinent right now while there's these investigations going on. I think it will be on a. So that's my ruling. If you'd like to object to it, we'll go to a roll call vote.
I would.
Okay, roll call vote.
Do we have a second to the objection?
Second. Legislator Baines, second.
Legislator Baines, seconds. A yes sustains the ruling of the chair. Mr. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Brew votes yes. Mr. Felder?
Yes.
Mr. Felder votes yes. Mr. Flagler Mitchell? Mr. Flagler Mitchell is absent. Mr. Alcoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Alcoffer votes yes. Mr. Ansello?
Yes.
Mr. Ansello votes yes. Ms. Barnhart?
No.
Ms. Barnhart votes no. Mr. Baroth?
No.
Mr. Baroth votes no. Mr. Baines?
No.
Mr. Baines votes no. Ms. Boyce?
Yes.
Ms. Boyce votes yes. Mr. Colby?
Yes.
Mr. Colby votes yes. Mr. Delahanty?
Yes.
Mr. Delahanty votes yes. Mr. DeFlorio?
Yes.
Mrs. DeFlorio votes yes. Mr. Dondorfer?
Yes.
Mr. Dondorfer votes yes. Ms. Hassman?
No.
Ms. Hassman votes no. Mr. Hebert?
Yes.
Mr. Hebert votes yes. Mr. Keofat-Lassie?
Yes.
Mr. Keofat-Lassie votes yes. Ms. Lamar?
Yes.
Ms. Lamar votes yes. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Mr. Mafucci?
No.
Mr. Mafucci votes no. Mr. Marionetti?
Yes.
Mr. Marionetti votes yes. Mr. Morelli?
No.
Mr. Morelli votes no. Ms. Roman?
No.
Ms. Roman votes no. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Smith votes yes. Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
Taylor votes yes. Mr. Terp?
Yes.
Mr. Terp votes yes. Mr. Wilcox?
No.
Mr. Wilcox votes no. Mr. Wilt?
Yes.
Mr. Wilt votes yes. Mr. Udelson?
No.
Mr. Mr. Udelson votes no. President Carbone?
Yes.
President Carbone votes yes. Oh, sorry, 19-9, the ruling of the president is upheld.
Is there any further discussion?
Mr. President, Legislator Felder. Legislator
Go
Felder
ahead,
here.
Legislator Felder?
I'm guessing that we're going to approve Ms. I can't think of her name now, tonight. And so then the Ethics Commission will be free to begin their investigation. I don't think we should be sitting here in a county legislature meeting.
This was not allowed.
Excuse me, I have the floor. I have the floor, Rachel. Thank you.
Well, I didn't. It was taken away from me. I was told I couldn't discuss this, so neither can you.
I'm not discussing it. What I'm saying is we should not be judging the issue. We should allow the Ethics Committee to make their investigation. We should also have an independent investigation, because I'm concerned with any appointment that's made by the county executive.
Mr.
He likes to put his thumb on the scale. So
Mr. President.
I look forward to both investigations.
Okay, let's call the question. Let's go to a vote.
President?
Let's go to a vote.
What's the vote
President
for?
Carbone, even Legislator Felder says, I guess. The question is, what is the status of the investigation?
Which one?
The county executive himself said you couldn't have an investigation until you got the third person. So I'm trying to figure out why people are asking the question what the status of an investigation is. It has not begun because we don't have a fully staffed ethics committee. So I don't understand ethics board. So I'm trying to figure out why people ask what the status of an investigation is when the county executive himself said we can't have an investigation until we approve this third person.
Mr. President.
Mr. President, point of order.
This is where this is going.
Point of order, Legislator Colby.
I don't think either of these discussions are relative. I think what we should be voting on is, my point is, we should only be voting on the person's qualifications, and that's all we should be voting on here tonight. These other are side-by questions that are irrelevant to the person that we are voting on.
I'll uphold your point of order. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. There being no unfinished business, Legislator Brew.
Legislator Barnhart.
Yes, Legislator Barnhart.
Yes, President Carbone, I would like to know the status of the
It has to be on the agenda. There's no unfinished business.
investigation into Ernest Flagler Mitchell. I think it's wrong for you to silence a discussion on sexual harassment of a member of
President, there's no unfinished business on the agenda.
There's no unfinished business on the agenda. We're not silencing anything, Legislator Barnhart. You know there's two separate investigations. You're trying to spin this some way. Legislator Brew, Legislator Brew.
President,
Point of order.
the next meeting of the
President,
Monroe County
point of order.
Legislature, the next meeting of the Monroe
Mr.
County
President, point of order.
is scheduled for Tuesday, February 9th, 2020.